Reed, we are so out of practice with this. Well, first of it, and I say that, you'll see why, but welcome to the Digible Dudes podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reed.
Yeah, well, because we started the interview, we're going to do it with Dwellsy. And I said that at the gate because we haven't done like a real, our traditional podcast with an intro and all that stuff. And so I was all like screwed up.
For about a half second, that occurred to me.
Yeah.
And then I was like, F it. Let's just go.
And then I was like,
had enough problems just trying to get connected.
I know. And I didn't want to, there's a lot going on with us right now. And I didn't want to like interrupt everything. And then the first like 30 minutes of the interview, it was like, I'm going to ask like a 10 question list and you're going to ask a 10 question list before it became a real conversation. But 75% through, we figured it out and we got into a real conversation.
Yeah. And I think it still works, or it worked on that one. Jonas is great, and Dwellsy's super interesting company.
Yeah. So in this episode, we're talking with Jonas, co-founder of Dwellsy and CEO. And he was a great sport. He just rolled with a bunch of questions that we have about the ILS and how although he doesn't want to consider Dwellsy an ILS, we didn't force him on a name if there's a new, like if he wants to be considered in a new category. But he said he did admit that it feels like an ILS because he needed something to be familiar for people when they went there. But
right out of the book, hooked.
Yeah.
Got to go for familiarity.
I feel like he would have. He's probably already read that book. Seems like he's well read.
Yeah, he had some indirect, I don't want to say references, but just a lot of insights that shared with the book. Yeah.
The other thing to take us, well, first of all, I guess I should say is we kind of go all over the place, like how, like why they started Dwellsy, how they're trying to attack the market, like their scale, which spoiler, he says that they have more inventory than any other ILS as far as his calculations and understand, which is really interesting. I kind of feel like I could have done a whole thing on that, but I also didn't want to put him in a weird spot where he didn't want to get into details, but he seems willing to go into the 12 million units that they have on, which is super exciting. Mm-hmm. And then obviously business model, because right now they don't charge for listings and they just want to provide the best experience. I thought that was all terrific. Anything else on the episode before I go a little bit, of course, off? I'm going to do a right-hand turn a little bit on this one.
No, I don't think so. I'll just say I got a kick out of the fact that you asked how to pronounce his last name. Just reveal the fact that you don't drink wine. I'll just leave that there so people listen for at least the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Get a kick out of that.
Yeah. I also feel like I've never had like ADD or ADHD, but more recently my mind I'm not as focused. And I was watching Billions. Billions is back. Did you know that?
No, I didn't. I'm like 3 episodes removed now, or 3 seasons. Sorry.
Oh my God, you got to get back. Well, that's right. Miranda and you aren't on the same page. I just need to
resell it on Miranda.
Yeah. Well, anyways, they have part of the season that got cut in half because of COVID, because they were midway through filming, so they released it, and then they go. But one of the story plots is there's a new limitless drug, and I feel, and when Axelrod is describing the drug, he's like, you're gonna have the energy of a 17-year-old, the focus of a 30-year-old, and a wisdom of a 100-year-old. And I was like, oh, really? 30-year-olds are that much more focused? And then today I was like, oh, shoot, I am kind of all over the place. I guess I'm not 30 anymore.
Right.
So somewhere went my focus.
And no reference to the 45-year-old.
No, you're straight in the middle.
No selling point there.
Yeah, that's why Axelrod wants the drug, Read. He's probably in that age bracket.
That's right.
Well, anyways, I don't know if you noticed, but I got this thing across the top of my nose, and
I've noticed about 18 times today.
Oh, really?
Somehow not.
You didn't bring it up?
No, it's not because I have too much respect for you, even though I do.
Yeah.
But I just haven't gotten to it.
Yeah. So
make me tell my famous chip story with Miranda. I'll save that for another podcast.
Okay. Well, I thought maybe you would think I had gotten a bar fight or something finally last night.
That wasn't my first guess. It's more like a log, or a tree fell on.
Yeah. One of the logs I have, as I'm splitting all this wood, sometimes I'm like in shorts because I'm like, screw it, it's so freaking hot out there and then like some of them just like go straight into your shins. Yeah. So I need like sterling shin guards or something. Yeah. No, so it wasn't from that.
Oh, okay.
No. Right. This, I get home and the dogs always lose their mind, and so it was Lucy. Lucy just like headbutted me, and then like it just like split my nose open, and I was like, oh God, I'm dizzy. And I was like, Nicole, am I bleeding? And she's like, no, you're not bleeding. And I go straight to the bathroom. It's like, I was like, man, Lucy just got me good. So,
Well, mystery
anyways,
solved.
yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. No
Yeah.
bar fight.
Sure. Jonas will be thrilled that
This is the
this
intro
is
to
the
this
intro
episode.
to
Yeah.
Dwellsy. Yeah.
Yeah. We want to talk about Dwellsy, but first.
Yeah. Breaking news.
Yeah.
All
Anything
right.
else?
No, I
Yeah.
really do think though. I mean, I said it up front, but he was great, and he said I think he has a good relationship with Everett, who's also amazing. These guys, like, I feel like my self esteem gets lower and lower when I hear these guys speak. 'Cause I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
God, we need to up our game. But yeah, he's just got a great perspective, and also you could feel the passion as he talked about his company and the industry, which I always admire. I think it's cool.
Yeah. Great. Well, stay tuned and hope you guys enjoy. We really had fun with this one. All right. Welcome to the Digible Dudes podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reed.
And Reed, today we're here with Jonas Bordo, who is CEO and co-founder of Dwellsy. Welcome, Jonas.
It's great to be here, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. Well, I know I sent you a synopsis of your own career, which, but instead of me reading off your career back to you, how about you give us a little bit of introduction to you and, what Dwellsy is and how you got there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a real estate guy, kind of born and bred. I grew up in the real estate space with family, and ever since then have kind of been on my way back to it. And for the past 15 years, been working in real estate in various capacities. Most recently, before founding Dwellsy, I was running centralized operations for Essex Property Trust, which is about 60K units on the West Coast. So had the chance to really get detailed understanding of how do you run assets and units in this business. And that led me to the founding of Dwellsy. I've been doing Dwellsy for about 2.5 years now, and that's who I am.
Cool. Well, thanks for that.
Mm-hmm.
Shoot, I don't know where I want to go first, but you had been out of you were just saying before we got on air that you had been doing consumer stuff before, and
Mm-hmm.
then you had obviously been in property management before jumping into Dwellsy. And
Yeah.
you were saying that now you're having to build kind of a two-sided marketplace, although you didn't call it a two-sided marketplace. So walk us through, like, in the 2.5 years, I'm sure that's flown by, but how, like, what Dwellsy has been able to accomplish today and where you guys are at.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's very much a two-sided marketplace, but a bit of a different take on it. There's some things that are possible now that wouldn't have been possible a few years ago. So we very much need to and are building that great consumer experience to allow renters from all across the country to be able to find their next place on Dwellsy, and at the same time offer a great experience to landlords, property managers, such that they're able to get their places rented in an incredibly cost efficient and professional way. The goal is to allow every renter to find their place and every property manager or landlord to get their place rented. That's what we're building towards.
And how do you answer people about, like, oh, Dwellsy, another ILS? Why do we need another ILS? So how do you answer that?
Well, I don't think we need another ILS. I want to be very clear on that. Nothing against the ILSs. I've been in and around that world for a long time, and I think they provide a really valuable service, and that's not going away anytime soon. Fundamentally, what the ILS is a paid marketing channel, and you're buying classified ads. It's like roughly the same as the street corner circular from 1978. It's street corner circular on the internet. And it's been updated for current technology. So but it's still fundamentally the same, and that's a very useful tool because when you're trying to get your apartments rented, sometimes you need more traffic, and those folks can deliver a lot of traffic in a very directed way, and that's effective. What we're really looking to do is replace what Craigslist used to do, which is provide that steady baseline of traffic for every landlord in the country, and for the moms and pops out there who can't afford the ILSs or aren't willing to pay for the ILSs, provide everything they need in terms of getting their places rented, in terms of the exposure that they need. So that's our goal. It's a little bit different. So I'm sure we'll end up working collaboratively with the ILSs for the long term, but we don't really think of ourselves as an ILS in that same way, even though we function a little bit like one.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is rentals are going up on your site. People can find them like a traditional ILS, but I guess if I'm just trying to repeat back to you, you guys it's not pay to play. So
No.
You'll allow anybody to post up there. And it sounds like the gap in the market you see is that the pay to play model is maybe not, I don't know, fair or equitable, let's say for those moms and pops, and that's where that was the opportunity that led you to start Dwellsy, or would you adjust that?
I think it's a question of fairness or equity in that way. I think it's more a question of just price and who's willing to pay for what. And I think the market has seen very, very clearly that most landlords are not willing to pay for ILSs. That's why the ILSs collectively maybe have 15, 20% of the US inventory. If you look across all of them, their inventory has been shrinking in recent years as their prices have gone up. And that makes sense for their business. I understand why they're doing. I look at the public financials like everybody else does, and I can see that they're more profitable than they've ever been, and I'm happy for them. But we're looking to serve the overall market in a different way, and really be that destination. If you will, LinkedIn for the space. Right? There's lots of other tools you can use to hire people, but everybody goes through LinkedIn as you're in the process of hiring people. And the reason is because everybody's on LinkedIn and every recruiter can go to LinkedIn. And Dwellsy will be a little bit like that, but for rentals.
Yeah. I just got like two questions before I'll pass the read. But one is the 10 to 20% of inventory you talk about. Is that based on like all rentals, including single family, or is that more of okay?
Yeah. If you look at the U.S. rental picture, real ballpark numbers, it's 1/3 single family rentals, 1/3 very small format multifamily. We're talking the 2 to 6 unit buildings, and then the remaining third is multifamily, which is the world that I've been most experienced in recently. You all are probably most experienced in. That's where you've got the not just the 300 unit building, but also the 20 unit building. And that area is reasonably well served. But fundamentally, if you're going to build something like the ILSs have built, you're building an enterprise sales model. There's a reason folks can get away with charging $3,000 to list a community on one of those properties, and make sure it shows up on page one on every search. They're built for that scaled multifamily player, and they serve them very well. I've been a client of those, and I've gotten great leads from those platforms. They make sense for those folks, but they don't necessarily make sense, and they've been unable to kind of compete effectively with the yard sign for the individual single family renter or the very small format multifamily. I used to have a 3-unit building in Chicago, and I rented it on Craigslist back in the day. Now these days, I'd be putting a sign in the window and hoping somebody walked by looking for it.
Yeah. I guess this is the second half of that question before my final, but second half being of the 1/3 sort of multifamily, like traditional multifamily, as most of us think about, how many of those typically list, you think, on those major ILSs today? So I'm curious of, like, when you say 10 to 20% of the market, does that mean that basically like 2/3 of the traditional multifamily are on the traditional ILSs, but then 1/3 of those traditional aren't, and then the rest of the 2/3 are basically nowhere to be represented?
Yeah, so if you look at the large scale multifamily, you have to start segmenting out some cohorts, and thinking about what kind of market. If you're a Class A building in a major market, you're probably listed on one of the ILSs, maybe two, but usually just one. And if you're offering a Class C experience, B minus, C plus, something in that range, then the odds of you listing on one of those platforms is not that high, because it's a really tight margin business. And to use those platforms effectively, you really do need to pay for placement. And being somebody who's showing up on page 17 of the search results at the minimum price offered just to be present is not that value creating for the most part. You really need to, in my experience and what I hear from the landlords that I speak to every day, you really need to, pay a little bit more in order to get the value from those platforms. And most of those assets just don't have the budget for that. So, if I were to hazard a guess, I'd say probably half of the large scale multifamily isn't on an ILS at all. They're doing other things. But if you're looking at the kind of premium Class A that, frankly, most vendors in this space want to market to and want to reach, those folks are not going to get, are going to be mostly on the ILSs.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, my real last question before I was passing over to Reed was, what kind of scale whatever numbers you're allowed to share, what kind of scale have you guys gotten to today?
Yeah, so we've got north of 12 million properties listing with us when they have availability. which is approximately 25% of the U.S. inventory. We believe we're the largest listing service that's ever existed, after Craigslist, of course. Back in the day, I think I've never been able to verify this, but I think Craigslist had 80 to 90% of the U.S. inventory on its platform, and they're obviously a long way from that today. But we're building pretty aggressively, and have been just incredibly fortunate by the trust and the faith that the industry has put in us, and the support that we've gotten from folks across the space. Of course, super high quality leads at zero cost is a pretty compelling value proposition. So it makes it pretty easy for people to say yes. But that's where we are on that front. And then on the consumer side, we've grown the consumer audience by about 40% a month this year. We're still small and, far cry from the big legacy ILSs in terms of traffic, but it's building aggressively. And the key for us right now is just managed growth. There's tremendous pull from the marketplace. People want to use Dwellsy, and we just need to manage that to make sure we don't disappoint anyone along the way, and that we provide a great service at every step.
Well, maybe a good time then to ask what the business model is, because I agree it's a super compelling value proposition, to the landlords, and it seems like a great, experience for the consumer. So how does Dwellsy make money in the middle of this? Because you compared yourself briefly, not compared yourself, but mentioned Craigslist, then you mentioned LinkedIn, obviously one nonprofit, one for-profit. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing that people struggle to wrap their brains around with our business is that we're not charging for listings. There's no charge for leads. There's no charge for leases. We're not getting involved in the transaction at all. And I think the central insight there is, once you introduce any barrier to people listing with you, a lot of people are going to decide not to list with you. And that was, we very much saw that in my multifamily career and in my single family, rental career as an individual landlord. And we really wanted to remove all the barriers. So that's critical. So what does that mean in terms of how we're actually going to make money? We're going to have a variety of optional services for folks. So, if we get to the point, if we're lucky enough to get to the point where, 80, 90 or more % of landlords are listing with us, we're going to offer a variety of services that help them have a better listing experience, that help them market more intelligently, help them really utilize data in the platform in a way that allows them to get more from their assets and offer a better experience to the renter. We'll also offer those services to renters. We have a variety of those products that are coming in the market in the next year. But fundamentally, if 5% of the people transacting on the platform pay us something for a value-added service, we've got an enormous business that is tremendously exciting.
Yeah, super cool. And I remember you sharing that with us when we first spoke with you, a bit of the Amazon model, not entirely though. But, are you guys going to be fulfilling the majority of those services and products, or are you kind of securing like strategic partners now? We just actually had Everett Lynn, who CEO and founder of Minify, and he seems like he could be a great fit for Dwellsy, but didn't know if you guys were planning to take most of that on yourself.
Yeah, no, completely love Everett. He's a fabulous guy, and been really impressed with what Minify's done. We view ourselves as there's a couple of different opportunities that our platform will present. Number one, there's services that we'll be able to offer that nobody else will be able to offer because of the nature of the business. And for those kind of products, we'll offer them ourselves. There's kind of a delicate line that needs to be maintained. We need to be, if this isn't too fine a point, kind of Switzerland in the industry. We need to be pro-renting without taking sides between renters and landlords. So there's a lot of services out there where, for example, I think the Rhinos of the world do a fabulous service around replacing security deposits. And that kind of product, we definitely look for partners to be able to offer that service, because fundamentally you're kind of, picking sides and getting involved in the battle when the battle does arise. And we don't want to be in that situation. So we'll look for partners in those situations. But we are also going to be, providing access to landlords on our platform for people who want to sell to them, and to renters for people who want to sell to them as well.
Yeah. Well, you kind of got in front of my follow-up, which was when you look at that pie chart, and not to obsess here about the numbers or finances, how much of that is products and services directed towards consumer versus landlord, as you mentioned, kind of the two opportunities there. Because you have more to sell into theoretically with consumer, but obviously it could be more buying power in easier path forward, like with products and services directed at the landlords.
Yeah. I think the majority of our business model, the overwhelming majority of the business model will be, consumer-like in nature, which is to say, renters will be an important part of our business model. They have to be our customer. We need to serve them. One of the challenges that the ILSs have had is that the landlord is very clearly their customer. The property manager is very clearly their customer. The renter is the product. And so in doing that, their platforms reflect that. And for us, the renter needs to be the customer. So we will have products and services that are sold to them, but it's not going to be a huge percentage of our overall revenue. I think the biggest percentage of our revenue in the long run will actually be the mom and pop landlords. They need a ton of help to make sure they're in the right place and doing great stuff. And there's a lot of different things that we'd be able to offer them. The institutional scale landlords are pretty well served by a lot of other folks. And I see in that situation, us really getting involved in channel partnerships and, doing our best to play well with others across the space and, profit from making introductions and referrals and other things, rather than offering direct services to the institutional folks. I think they'll also, like the renters themselves, they'll be a minority of our revenues in the long run.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. So next question is around, I guess, competitors. I think you clearly already kind of laid out how you guys are unique, but if this model's as successful as it already seems like it's starting to become, would you expect and ultimately welcome competitors like, with Dwellsy? Because we've said that ourselves with our own platform. It's like sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's not. And then why hasn't this happened sooner is also a question I have. And that almost takes me back to when David was first introducing you, and you mentioned, that you've been in the space for a while. I didn't hear the light bulb moment. I didn't know if it was a slow discovery or realization that there was an opportunity here, or whether it hit you over the head or in the middle of the night. But that kind of connects somewhat to what you're expecting if Dwellsy is successful.
Yeah. Kind of two parts to that. I'll tackle the competitive piece first. Welcome competition always. There's a lot of different people out there trying to help renters and trying to help property managers and landlords. And, competition is just always essential to keeping us all strong and healthy. And absent that, people get weak and companies get weak. So I think competition is always a good thing to have, even though you might get frustrated with it in the moment. For us, in terms of light bulb moment, I can trace back to my time at Essex. There were a few things that I spotted simultaneously that just shocked me. Number one, I saw our lead volume from Craigslist go to zero. And I'm exaggerating a little bit. Didn't go exactly to zero, but it went pretty darn close to zero. And we could not figure out what was happening because it just seemed implausible that Craigslist was no longer a viable source. It had been 50% or more of our lead volume at many of our properties and some of our highest quality lead volume too. And we were incredibly invested in Craigslist as a source. We had people all across the entire system trained to use Craigslist in, somewhat optimal way. And the resources put behind it were huge. So when that changed, it completely took us by surprise and it seemed implausible. But I saw that. And then I also did a bunch of focus groups at one point trying to understand the consumer acquisition cycle, which is, the kind of luxury that you get at a big company that you really don't get at any kind of smaller property management platform. But I just remember talking to folks who were on their third or fourth rental search in their, career as a renter, and talking about how they were reminiscing about how easy the rental search used to be and how excruciating it was now. And, I then went out and started talking to renters at every one of our properties to try to understand, how we at Essex, where I was, could get in front of them better. And what I found is that there was no place that they were going anymore. They were terrified of Craigslist for obvious reasons. They're mostly driving around neighborhoods and doing Google searches to find things. So that got me into SEO and SEM and trying to figure that out and talk about painful and expensive. If local SEO and local search, like y'all are experts there, and I'm glad folks have you to help them, because it is really hard, and you can spend a lot of money very unproductively down that path if you don't know what you're doing. And we spent a lot of money very unproductively back in the day trying to figure that out without help from experts like y'all. So, seeing that, it just seemed like, wow, these folks are always going to have struggles with SEO and SEM. Craigslist is no longer the presence. You no longer have to be a Craigslist killer. You actually have to, figure out how to get in front of the renter, and the renter doesn't know where to go anymore to find rentals. And I talked to a few people in the industry trying to get them to start this, and nobody would. So I was actually raging to a friend in the industry, another property manager, about this. And he's like, wow, you're really charged up about that. You're a lot more charged up about that than you are about property management. Maybe you should go do that. And 3 hours later, made the call to go do it. So here I am.
That's cool.
Reed, I heard Jonas say he's happy for the ILSs because they're so profitable. I heard him say that he's happy that people have us to do work, and he built, I'll call it still, an ILS that doesn't charge anything. What? Something smells fishy. I don't get it.
Right. And there's
look,
one ILS that's actually making money.
Yeah.
Every renter out there is going to have their own process, right? And every community is going to need to get in front of that renter and find their audience, and they're going to need help along the way. And, the goal is for Dwellsy to be an essential piece, and frankly, to give folks like you a bunch of extra tools that you can use to help your clients more effectively, and for your clients to be able to get tools as well that they can use. But there's always going to be a high level of sophistication at the high end of this industry that needs folks like you. And there's always going to be folks out there who need more traffic than Dwellsy will be able to drive. Maybe it's a lease up. Maybe it's just a chronically oversupplied market. Maybe they're trying to get higher rents than the market might justify, but that's part of their strategy. Those are all reasons why somebody might want a lot more traffic. And the ILSs have historically been really good at helping in that kind of situation. And I have no reason to expect they won't continue to do that in the future.
Well, that was, as you were talking through that, and that kind of shock first with what was happening with Craigslist, but then as you did those focus groups and hearing that the renters were really more aggravated than ever and how to find a new home or apartment, that surprises me a little, meaning, go to the internet. And I'm not trying to simplify this too much, but then how has Dwellsy changed that equation? And I'm not trying to make you retread, but just unpack a little bit more for us, because, right now, as David said, it would appear at the surface that there's not huge differentiation between the experience of going to Dwellsy and going to apartments.com. Fair or not fair. So feel free to jump into that. But therefore, what is Dwellsy doing to make it that much better or easier for renters to find a home than before Dwellsy?
Yeah. So fair, completely fair. And it's been very intentional. One of the reasons we built Dwellsy the way we built it is because we felt like it needed to be familiar to people, and it needed to feel comfortable and safe. And so, we view the opportunity in the future for incremental improvement, starting from where we are today. In terms of how we've changed the search today, it's too early to say. My ego would be way too big if I said that we've dramatically changed the nature of the search today. I think we're on a path to do that, but we've not yet done that. As I understand it, the renter's search generally starts at Google. If you are an affluent renter, if you just graduated from college and you've got a good job lined up somewhere, you're probably going to be really well served by one of the Class A apartment communities that shows up high in the search, or one of the traditional listing services that shows up high in the search. We think it's the top 8% by affluence of renters is pretty well served by the existing marketplace. The next 90% is not well served. And generally they get frustrated on Google, they go offline, and they start walking communities. And within that 90%, I'd include not just the slightly less affluent folks, but also the people who want inventory that's a little more interesting, that's not in a 300 unit community where it's beautiful and it's incredibly well managed, but it's all the same. I was that renter. I wanted a cool loft on the west side of Chicago, and I could afford something nice. And I looked really hard. I looked for months to find the right place, and I found this great place that I loved, and it was wonderful. But that renter is very poorly served today on the internet. That renter is out walking the streets right now, looking for a for rent sign. And we aim to get in front of that renter and serve that renter. And we're working hard to do that. And every month it gets better. Every month we serve more of those folks.
Yeah. Well, I could keep going on that one, but I want to allow us to get to some other areas. And one before I turn it back to David is Facebook Marketplace. Where do you see that? What's the relationship there? We know huge change happened here in early September, and then eliminating aggregators or the opportunity to just bulk upload, if you will, posts. So is that an important source of traffic, or if you guys, I'll just let you answer.
Yeah. So, you all know much more about Facebook Marketplace than we do. We've not done any work with them. We don't upload Dwellsy listings anywhere. Dwellsy is, we don't syndicate our listings to any other platforms. And Facebook Marketplace is not now, nor would I expect it to be in the future, a source of traffic for us. So we've kind of been away from all of the change there, and we haven't. We've heard about it tangentially, but it hasn't been a part of our business. Obviously Facebook's an enormous platform, and great service in a lot of different ways, but it's also challenging. I know they've had some fraud issues, they've had some fair housing issues, they've had some other issues on that platform, and so I think everybody just has to be really careful when they're working with it and make sure they're working with it safely.
I totally agree. And people have made a lot of comparisons to Craigslist. It's the new Craigslist, but some say a little better quality, some say same old stuff, just different platform. But you mentioned that you guys don't syndicate anywhere. Clearly that has to be intentional. So can you talk to us a little bit more about the choice not to syndicate any listings? Is that all an SEO play, or is there other reasons that you guys, and I think maybe you just got at it a little bit as far as why you wouldn't want to be or decided not to be a part of Facebook Marketplace, but any other commentary there as far as the decision not to syndicate your listing?
I think the traditional rationale for syndicating is because you're selling leads. And so if you can find a more efficient, if you can get somebody to your platform for $5, and then, sell their lead for 15 to a property manager, then you want to syndicate the heck out of your content. If that's your business model, then you should share your content everywhere. That's not our business model. We want the renter to have an exceptional experience. We want the landlord to have a high quality lead that helps them get their place rented. We don't want to generate low quality traffic. We don't want to take what is, incredibly valuable asset that we've worked hard to build, which is our relationship with our landlords and with property managers who list with us, and make that subject to the whims of another platform that we can't control, that might do totally great stuff with that content, but might also not. So I'd rather be able to, look that property manager in the eye and let them know that, they can trust that, what they see on Dwellsy is the experience that they're going to have, and that we can control the experience for the renter, so they know if they're going through Dwellsy, it's high quality, high trust experience for them as well.
Yeah, cool. It makes sense. Well, Dave and I do this to each other. I'll say I got one more question, and then he'll ask you 18, and then I'll wait. But my final one for now is, what's the tipping point, if you don't mind sharing, as far as when those products will start to be released, or are they already starting to be released as far as the monetization? Because Facebook itself, everybody knows, did not open up to, or create an ad platform for 7-10 years. Et cetera. And there's a lot of businesses that take that approach. So are you guys already releasing products, or is that something that we should expect in 2022, 2023?
We're definitely already releasing products. We are, a little like Facebook. Actually, I was talking to somebody the other day who compared us to Facebook, which I thought was very generous, because I don't think we're quite as sexy as they were at this, 2.5 years into their development. But the first products are out there. We have an instant text alert product for renters. that helps them be first in to find out about a rental and potentially first to see it and first to apply, which, as we all know in this industry, makes a huge difference between getting the place and not getting the place, particularly when you're dealing with that long tail inventory, that unusual inventory. So that's one of our first products. We've just started experimenting with advertising on the site. You get up to serving a few million page views a month, and it starts to be interesting. So we're experimenting there. We've also experimenting with some early partnerships with some major brands where we know we can drive traffic to them, either on the renter side or the landlord side. So we're in the kind of experimentation phase on the revenue front. And we will continue to introduce products over the course of the coming years ahead. But the focus initially was on we wanted to have a great supply experience for renters when they came on the platform, and be able to do some things that people haven't really been able to do before. We're maniacal about trust and safety on our platform, and we cull a lot of listings that we see out there on other sites that we just don't know if they're legit or not. They're probably legit, but there's enough fraud in the space that we want to be really careful and really safe. We're also maniacal about availability. We don't show stale units if we can prevent it in any way, shape, or form. And I know as a multifamily manager, I wanted my stale units shown because it drove traffic, and it wasn't necessarily high quality traffic, but the site teams liked it. Because somebody came in asking about, has this unit that's facing the pool available? No, but I've got this one, that's across from the, trash bins. You might be interested in it. It gives them a chance to show that harder to rent unit. But for the renter, that's not a great experience. And it's also, relatively lower odds of getting something rented. So we are pretty aggressive on that. And we knew we needed a really deep supply to be able to offer that experience. So we focused on that early on. And now for the past year, 2021 really for us has been about onboarding renters. And we've really focused hard on that and have grown from, standing start at the beginning of the year to, as I mentioned, 40% per month, serving millions of pages a month now. It's pretty exciting.
And Jonas, I heard, the first product sounded like it would be something a consumer would pay for, like the early text alert. So what are you experimenting with for a cost model there? And how hard is it to get someone to say, I'll put in my credit card for a $2 charge so you can text me first, or whatever it is?
Yeah. We're experimenting. And it's a bunch of our early products have never existed before. And that's an example of them. So anytime you're offering a new product that has never been available before, it's a challenge to get consumers used to the idea of it. But we've definitely been getting people signing up for it and putting in their credit card and buying it. We're experimenting with different pricing on it. Is it $5 a month? Is it, one price for a year? What's the right approach? We've tried a few different things. We'll keep trying things on that. One of the fun things about being a startup is you can try lots of different stuff and see what sticks.
Yeah, well, that's cool because, that you're actually trying to monetize part of that side, but those microtransactions just, I told you, I think before we started, I don't envy you trying to get into hitting consumers. I think Reed would have more fun there than me, but the microtransactions Reed has talked many times about before. I had
a good idea.
Which part? Microtransactions generally?
Microtransactions. I'm a big believer.
Yeah.
Me too.
And you've brought up higher quality leads on Dwellsy a couple different times. So why do you think that is? Well, first of all, what data could you give the audience about why you think your leads are higher quality, and then why do you think they are higher quality?
Yeah, so we're built for the ground up to provide a really high experience, a really high quality experience for everybody involved, and that has a couple of different benefits, and also a really rigorous trust infrastructure. So there's a few things that others haven't done, and then a few things that just collectively nobody's ever done before. So first, it's pure organic search. The renter finds what they are looking for, nothing else. There's no paid placement. They're not looking at the latest lease up every time they do a search, even though they're not, even though they're looking for that loft on the west side of Chicago and, they're seeing the lease up in Elgin, that's not what they're looking for. And that's just going to result in a low quality lead for that landlord. Might make sense, and I bought some traffic to make the front office happy in my day, so I know how that goes. But from our perspective, we want the renters to be able to find what they want, and the landlords to get a high quality lead. So that's at the core of it. The next thing is just making sure that every renter is verified on the platform, that we know this is a real person. It's not a bot. It's a person who's actually made the effort to verify who they are. And I think that's really important, just to make sure that landlords can trust who they're dealing with, and that, again, that person shows intent beyond just, oh yeah, maybe I'm interested. I'll click a button, or I'll just figure out when they look at a listing. I know some of the listing services out there, if you look at a listing on it, you're counted as a lead, and that's not the case on Dwellsy. You actually have to submit an inquiry, and we've intentionally erected a little bit of a process there. So it's not just click a button, submit an inquiry. We want you to have the chance to customize your lead inquiry form to that landlord, ask any questions that you might have. And that's very intentional, both to improve the lead quality, give the landlord a little bit more information, give the renter the opportunity to provide a little more information, and make sure that it's not an accidental inquiry. Which, the number, I stood up a contact center in my past life at Essex, and the number of renters I talked to who are like, why are you calling me? Oh, yeah, maybe I did click a button. And they just had no idea that they submitted an inquiry, and we paid $15 for that inquiry. That was not an experience we wanted to offer. So there's a number of other things we're doing, but those are some of the things at the core that make it a higher quality inquiry.
Yeah, some friction helps eliminate a lot of the garbage. So,
and if you think back to our incentive structure, we don't get paid for that inquiry. We want everybody to have a great experience. That's our incentive. It's not, if we make it a little bit easier and we can juice inquiries by 10%, that means our income will go up by 10%. Different structure.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's interesting, though, that apartment lists, we often hear create some of the, I don't want to say worse leads, but just lead fatigue, because so many of those aren't qualified. And yet it feels, for me, when I went through the process relatively early, and it took me 20 minutes to finally get my, I'll say, application through. And so you'd think that they would have the most qualified, but maybe, a big part of this is the paid versus organic traffic. I mean, it's just one piece of the equation, but maybe it's a bigger part than I realized. Because I always felt like apartment lists, given my own experience, would produce super high qualified leads, just because you put so much investment. Therefore, your point, Jonas, about just being verified, knowing that we're dealing with a real person that has intent. What person is willing to spend 20 minutes answering all the questions that our apartment list poses? And yet, again, we hear time and again from our clients that they just get flooded with poor leads from apartment list. And I'm not trying to take a shot. I'm just being frank here.
No, and I give them a lot of credit for, without really changing the business model of the space, really trying to take a different approach and offer a different value proposition for the renter, and really try to hone in. I think the challenge for any of the traditional ILSs is you get to the end of whatever process they have, whether it's a super lean process or a 20-minute robust intake process, and it's kind of all the same stuff. It's like a selection of large-scale multifamily. I remember one of the major ILSs, we narrowed down when I was at Essex from, we were using most of our properties, 3 or 4 ILSs. And as the prices went up and up and up, we found ourselves having to go down. And we were only at 1 ILS by the time I left. Most of our properties, except, a couple of problem properties or lease ups where we were on multiples. And one of the ILSs left our inventory on theirs for 9 months. Under the theory that we were negotiating an extension. We weren't. But they left it up there. And I remember having a conversation with my sales rep at a conference, and it's like, well, why are we still up? He's like, well, and he had a drink or two. He said, well, we actually need your inventory. You guys have great stuff, and you help us get to a level of inventory in your markets that gives the renter enough to look at to stay interested. And I was like, well, I'll give you my inventory for free. If you want to leave it up there. And it came down the next week. Strategic error on my part, but
yeah.
I think that's the game they're playing, right? And I understand that, right? They've got to find that right balance of maximizing pricing, but at the same time, they can't scare off all the landlords. They have to have that balance between price and supply. But if you're a renter going through that process and you get to the end of it, and you just see a collection of big multifamily assets that are all similar in many ways, the odds of them being able to fulfill your needs at that point are relatively low.
Yeah, I've heard that same anecdote from multiple companies where they pull their stuff and it's left up, and I always thought of it like in billboard advertising when they have overage, that it's just like because I think some of it is the negotiation play to say like, well, do you really want us to turn this off? But I think sometimes, as big as these companies are, they're not as automated about pulling stuff down as need be. So someone has to take effort to actually
Right.
discontinue something, and it's like, I'm busy, don't want to, and next thing you know, it's been 9 months. So
Yeah.
I wanted to go quickly back to you mentioned, it sounded like, so you've monetized some of the consumers and you're also testing some B2B monetization. And it sounded like some is just probably programmatic advertising hitting the site, but some of it sounded like you may have some sort of something to help drive traffic to certain property management companies if they want. Is that true, or did I I misforecast?
No, yeah, we don't have anything like that at this point. We may at some point, if you think about kind of Google circa 2010, 2012, where there was, 2 or 3 sponsored results in the search results. We've envisioned a possibility of offering something like that at some point. But kind of reserving judgment on whether that makes sense. I think the core of the value proposition for renters is that they need to be able to find what they're looking for and have an experience that's driven by them, not the other way around. So we never want the advertising to get in the way of that. But, will there be an opportunity for a lease up to, buy a sponsored listing at some point? I wouldn't rule that out.
Yeah, well, you're about to wind Reed up and set him off, because I think we did a prior podcast episode on like, if we built an ILS, what would it look like? And he was just like, rip the Google model. What, why would you do anything differently? But
They seem to have figured a few things out.
yeah. Going to you mentioned a lot of what you focus on seems to be the small landlord, at least for your this conversation, and those unique units and not the typical 300 unit building or whatever. How can you, so how have you gotten to the scale that you have with the 12 million units that you're talking about? And in particular, a lot of it is these smaller mom and pop landlords, because you don't have the sales team to go get it. They may not have the integrations to send you the inventory. And yeah, a lot of that seems like, well, wouldn't the other of ILSs already have taken their inventory, like a Zillow or something, which is also kind of a unique bird to me. But yeah, just talk us how you've gotten to that scale, and that may help me just, I don't know, visualize this whole thing and how you plan to continue to go to market.
Just want to start by being very clear. We love the multifamily world. Our renters love the multifamily world. They're getting great leads through our platform. And the reason I really want to make a point there is that it's not that they are more than or less than. It's that the renter who's out there, and I remember so clearly, back to the contact center experience, and I took hundreds of calls sitting on the contact center desk and, participating in the training of our contact center agents and everything. And the number of callers I talked to who were, just think about the Bay Area, I remember this one gentleman I talked to, sticks with me, who was considering a single family rental in Fremont, considering our 2-bedroom place in San Mateo, which is like 40 miles away from Fremont, or considering a walk up in San Francisco. And that is not an unusual renter spectrum of decisions. And, maybe I'll be closer to family, maybe I'll be closer to home, maybe I'll be closer to my work, maybe I'll live with roommates, maybe I won't. Renters consider the full spectrum. And I think that anybody who's going to serve them needs to have the full spectrum of rental opportunities for them in one place. So, really important to have multifamily as part of that picture, as well as the single family and the small format multifamily as well. As I think about how we've onboarded listings onto the platform, first and foremost, you got to understand how the system works and work within it. That's been core to our platform. We've been fortunate to have great partnerships with the major property management software companies and gotten those integrations in place quickly and been able to make it so that either we've gotten all of their inventory from their underlying customers, or it's a simple one click for customers to add their listings to Dwellsy. And then I've talked to a lot of people. I ran the numbers the other day. I think I've talked to over 2,100 property managers in the last 2 years. I've done over 2,100 calls with folks just asking them to list with Dwellsy. Sometimes it takes people a little while to get used to the idea. But at the end of the day, it's free, high quality leads. So it doesn't take that much time to get used to it. I've only gotten one no so far. There's still a lot of people I'm working on, but only one no.
Those are pretty good odds.
Yeah.
I was going to ask the other half if David wasn't about to, but so you helped us understand how you got all the inventory, but how are you growing renters at 40%? Is it a shotgun approach? Is it, more prescriptive? Like, is there certain geographies that you're really seeing a lot of momentum on, and then kind of letting it organically build from there? But if you're not using any paid search tactics, it just begs the question: how are you able to grow the renter side as quickly as you have?
We are experimenting with all different channels. So we're experimenting with paid search and paid social,
right.
and seeing what it means to acquire people through those platforms. We have a full, robust content management, content marketing strategy, social media strategy. And we've probably been a little too scattershot. You could say that, but we've also experimented with a lot of different channels and been surprised at times by what has worked and what hasn't, and things that didn't seem to be working turned out to be contributing in different ways often. So we tried a lot of different things, and it's just kind of the cumulative building of all of those things. I will say, one huge advantage that we have that I didn't have when I was a property manager is we're a national player. We learned early on that highly geographically targeted marketing is very expensive. So it was an early decision to be national in scope. The original hypothesis was that we should try this in a couple of markets, but the reality of the large-scale property managers and the property management software companies is they are not local. They usually span at minimum 2, 3, 4 markets or more. And so it just made sense for us with, very quickly developing nationwide inventory, and the realization that national campaigns were dramatically cheaper to just do that. But we're constantly managing the balance between organic and paid acquisition. And we always want to make sure that we're attentive to the organic growing, because fundamentally that's the foundation where we need to be successful in the long run.
Sure. Well, that'll lead me then to the demographics. And you said there's a broad spectrum. I think you already pointed that out, but McDonald's marketing to the kids, right? So for Dwellsy, have you put much focus on college, colleges younger, the millennials, etc., whatever, to try and get them introduced to the brand, and had much success with that? Or you mentioned geographically we can't concentrate, but what about demographically? How you guys have been thinking about it?
Yeah, within the constraints of fair housing,
Right.
which is always in mind. Yeah, exactly.
Reed was trying to catch you. He was about to turn you in. He used like a podcast and a 45-minute interview so that he could get to that, and you sailed over.
You'd hear the
freaking waste of time.
You'd hear the siren go off.
Yeah. No, so obviously we all know how risky fair housing is. You all have a great product that helps people with that. So I think it's a delicate balance, because the reality is every segment of American society is a renter. In general, people who are younger tend to rent at a higher velocity rate. They just move more often. And so, we were chatting before the conversation. I mentioned we were on the Millennial Money podcast. Like, it's a great audience for us to be in front of, because those folks are in kind of peak renting years, and they're moving frequently, and they're thinking about new markets, and it's a great audience to be in front of. But we really have worked hard to have a broad appeal. I think we all know 30% of renters are over 50. 42, 43% of rental households have children in them. So we've actually, we are trying to have that very broad marketing perspective. You think about it as we're marketing an airline, or we're marketing any other kind of broad-based consumer product. We really do want to be the product that every renter uses. And that's both freeing as well as constraining. It can get pretty expensive to target everybody, but it also allows you to relax a little bit about, certain personas and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, I give an A+ for that response, Jonas. So, extremely well handled.
Yeah. Well
I
measured.
managed fair housing for 60,000 units. So,
Yeah,
I've
you could
been around the
tell.
block once or twice.
Well, going back to second to the small mom and pop, if you're at 25%, I think you were saying 25% of the market you think you cover now, right?
Correct. Yeah.
How do you guys have this like long-term goal of realistic goal of like 60%, 70%? Because you said you already think you cover more than the other ILSs. And then what's it going to take for you to get there? Because Jonas can't call, I don't know how many more property managers in the next, whatever, 5 years, but
2100.
well, yeah, he did 2,100 already, but for him to get to
Yeah.
100% inventory,
Yeah.
I'm a calling machine. I keep going. No, like, look, there's way too many people out there for me to call, as much as I'd love to chat with everyone. There's 10 million individual landlords in this country. If you think about the rough construct, we talked about it in terms of single family rentals and small format and large format multifamily. Another way of looking at the market is professionally managed versus individually managed. Your kind of mom and pop in the dialect of our space, and those folks, they're owning, operating, dealing with the day-to-day issues, and they're getting their place rented. And that's 10 million, 10.5 million individuals across the country managing, 22, 23 million apartments and rental homes. And that's a consumer strategy to get those folks on board. And so that for us is probably our biggest 2022 initiative, is to, really make sure that we serve that audience. They're finding us in huge numbers already. Actually, funny story, when we first built out our initial platform, and we didn't have any listings on it in any material way in the beginning, we built a really rudimentary tool to allow us to enter listings ourselves, just so that we could have some test data in there. And word got out on a mom and pop rental forum about it, and people were uploading. Before we knew it, we had dozens of listings that people had found. I don't know how they found it, but they'd found our back door and uploaded their listings. There's huge demand for this, for a safe, trustworthy place where people can, at zero cost, get the word out. So we're pretty excited to meet that demand.
Yeah. Well, how do you prevent? Because we've heard of those things in certain markets like New York and Chicago, but we've heard that there's some issues with duplicate listings because you'll get brokers that start like putting up multiple things. So how are you guys handling the duplicate listing issue then?
Yeah, my product team would kill me if I went into all the details on that, because there's some rocket science involved. But duplicate listings are an enormous problem in the space. I think the brokers can provide a wonderful service in the right circumstance, but when they're listing the same property, 250 times in Chicago, it drives us a little bit bonkers. So we have a lot of different strategies and techniques to deal with that. I think the most important is that we're working to resolve back to a single listing per unit. And really, the property manager, or, property manager broadly defined, or the property manager's assignee, needs to be the one getting that lead. So if you've hired a broker to rep your place, great. That person should be getting the lead. If you are representing it yourself, then you should be getting the lead on our platform. And we're going to be working really hard in the years to come to make sure that that's the case.
Yeah, I think it sort of goes back to the whole, if you guys aren't selling leads, less of an issue for you, because other
Correct.
folks that sell leads, they don't really care about all the duplicate listings.
No, duplicate listings are great in that situation, because you can sell the same lead a couple of times sometimes.
Yeah. I'm gonna switch gears with my next line of questioning. So if you have anything else on Dwellsy itself, I'm gonna go in a left turn.
Yeah. Okay. Then I'm going to squeeze these two in. Safe and trustworthy. Does that plateau before you get to your goal of 80, 90%? Because I feel like you have to acknowledge that some of that would be compromised, were you to get to that kind of scale. And I could be wrong in that assumption, but isn't that part of what did happen with the Craigslist? Is if you, because 25%, and I'm not saying that is where it should plateau, but wouldn't there be some relationship there as far as having that much scale and volume that you would then potentially be compromising the integrity of the quality that you keep referring to. So that's one. And then my second part of that's somewhat connected, so that's why I'm asking them at the same time. I have a habit of doing that, Jonas, in case you couldn't tell already. Is the experience that you also keep referring to. Do you guys stop short, like after you've made the match, let's say between landlord and renter, or are you trying to further that experience, or I'll say take some ownership in what happens afterwards? Because there's so much technology hitting these days that are trying to, from the time that you first contact to all the way when you're actually leasing the apartment, that's flooding the market. And I would think a lot of the type of inventory you're talking about, as David mentioned, integrations, and that they aren't necessarily focused as much on Dwellsy as they are, some of the traditional ILSs or other pay to play like platforms, because they're working more exclusively with that higher end multifamily like customer. So both of them are somewhat related to quality, but first one is my question: are you worried at all, or do you just kind of anticipate having to make some compromises as you continue to bring on more and more volume on the quality? Second question is that experience: how much are you guys committed to the entire experience of a renter?
Yeah. So we are as much as possible uncompromising on quality and trust. I think at the core of Craigslist, and you can read a gazillion of Craig's interviews on this topic. He believes internet anonymity is a right. I do not believe that anonymity is a right in the rental process. If you want to rent your place anonymously, then you can do it on somebody else's service. That's at the core of what we're doing. We are facilitating the connection between human beings who know who each other is. And we're taking a wide variety of steps to make sure that it's real people dealing with real people. And as a result of that, there are going to be some folks who won't want to list their property on Dwellsy. And so, when you talk about getting to 80, 90%, the 10 or 15% of people we'll miss will be those folks. Not that there isn't space to provide some spacing. I don't know that every landlord wants to have their personal cell phone out on the internet associated with the listing, but there's ways to work around that while still assuring that the landlord is who they say they are. And same goes for the renters. So
a hot take.
That was actually one of my questions coming up. So go ahead,
David. Just so you know, David loves his hot takes, and where you're being contrarian, and you just nice little dig at Craig.
Look,
I'm kidding. It's not
guys built a behemoth, and like that is a huge that is a huge and important question. Is like, how important is anonymity, and what's the trade-off between anonymity and fraud? Mm-hmm. And we are very clear that our perspective is we are going to minimize fraud, have a very safe platform, and we're going to give up anonymity in that pursuit. Mm-hmm. So from a fraud standpoint, I believe we'll be able to stick to our guns there without really sacrificing too much, but that will be a challenge. The fraudsters are endlessly creative, so we'll always have to work to make sure that we keep the platform safe. In terms of pushing up into the property manager's operations, we do not want to be in the property management software business. It's a great business. I have tremendous respect for the Arties, the Entradas, the Afolias, all of those folks who are great at doing that. Man, that's hard work. And each property manager builds their business around the way that they think it's best to serve their renters, and within the context of the property management software that they have chosen and the options that property management software provides them with. And we have the utmost respect for those professionals doing their jobs in their way. We have no interest in trying to go into that space. We think there's lots of great work and opportunity in making the match between renters and landlords up front, and then handing it off to those folks to be able to offer the great service that they have the potential to offer to those renters from there on out, and to run their business the way they want to run their business.
Cool. Well, hard left turn. Here we go.
Well, he started with hot takes. So, Jonas, this whole conversation that you had over a beer or whatever with another property manager that said, "You're so passionate, you should go do this." I imagine there were some other hot takes in there. So pick one or two of those that you're willing to share, but things that you just feel like the industry gets wrong or that you're contrarian about.
Goodness, it's hard to know where to start on that one. I've been around this industry for a bunch of different years, and there's a lot of different things I really love about it. I think the biggest opportunity that the industry as a whole has is to really follow the consumer product direction that our society has gone in, and recognize that the renter is used to buying things and be served as a consumer. And I think there's a lot of money to be made, to be blunt, by serving that need and by serving that consumer in the way they want to be served. And I think, frankly, the multifamily world is the best set up to do that. They've got the best infrastructure and the best ability to do that. And I think they need to stop looking at what they've got as commodity and start recognizing that they can offer a uniquely wonderful experience to that renter and go out and do that. And I think that's a completely missed opportunity that most people are not going after today.
I feel like Reed's about to bust out his consumerization.
You're the one that said, let's make it into a podcast.
Yeah.
Well, here we are. I'll come back for that one. We can chat.
Well, we had that in our summit, Jonas. We had a panel devoted to consumerization, the impact of that in multifamily. And Everett was actually on that as one of the panelists. And David Stanford was Real Foundations. And then we had a marketer. But they're just big, completely aligned with what you're saying there. We all agree with that. And it's super fascinating. And I won't rehash or go off like David's saying about, because I have a lot of other questions.
Everett was contrarian a little bit. He was like, I don't think we should just be throwing things in front of people to buy them. Because I asked him the question, like, well, if someone goes to lease an apartment, why not then sell them a moving company or whatever? And he was like, well, I don't think you need to do that. And he had to go because it was he was late. But I just sort of disagree. It's back to Jonas is hitting a lot of trusted source. He's like, people want trusted source that feels safe, that feels whatever. And as a consumer, I don't want to. I move rarely. In fact, I've never taken the step to hire a moving company because I don't have the best impression. So someone was like, this is my go-to moving company. You should do it and you're going to get $500 off. I'd be like, all right. So I just think there is opportunity there. I do agree we shouldn't be like slinging like discount ticket sales on like everything. Oh, you're going to buy a lamp for your place? Here you go. 20% off from like Lamps to Go or something. But I do think if you can do it tastefully and there is some revenue.
I think tastefully and thoughtfully. You think about the relationship that a renter has with their property manager. There's a lot of conflict in that relationship today. And I don't think that conflict necessarily needs to be there. And I think it can be much more of like a, not to use an overused term in the space, but much more of a hotelier kind of approach where you're getting great service from those folks and they are helping you with experiences that you don't source every day. You're new to the neighborhood. Well, we got a curated list of restaurants, not just the people who are paying us to add them to the list, but here are great restaurants that are in the neighborhood that our residents love. And we know because we've asked our residents and you would enjoy them. Here's a moving company that we have a relationship with, and we can guarantee that you're not going to get screwed by this moving company. They're not going to break your stuff and walk away. They're going to offer you a great service, and we're standing behind that as an independent verifier of their quality. Not just we get $50 and you get $50 if you use this moving company, but real value creation. I think there's a huge opportunity to bring them almost everything, because I think the point you mentioned, David, is a really good one, which most people don't buy these products all the time. And you want some help from somebody when you are buying these products so that you make a better choice. And somebody with more experience and who's in a better position to guarantee quality is going to be helpful every time.
Yeah. Well, one of my other left turn questions, maybe I should take a right turn, not left.
Yeah, there's a lot of left turns. We're driving in circles.
Right. We're just going in circles right now. Yeah, I think you had mentioned this was your first startup. Is that true?
Yeah.
All right. So I would like to move a little bit down that road. Curious about how it's been different than what you expected during that 3-hour decision to like leave your job and go start something. And then if you would recount your darkest day or moment as a founder, because I always think those are, well, we've
Yeah.
got some other examples that we could give you need, but
It's different in so many ways and on so many different levels. I was, used to working for large companies in our space for a lot of years, and very familiar with that experience and all that goes with that, both good and bad. On one hand, you have wonderful resources and great colleagues who can do all sorts of things so you don't have to do them. On the other hand, there's corporate politics and other stuff that you have to deal with. There's the differences are legion. If I were to think about the main one, it's like nobody's ever done this before. There's nobody to talk to. On an everyday basis, I have to make decisions that are make or break for the company, and you just never know if you're making the right one. So I just always try to differentiate between like, okay, this is a bet the company decision, and this is a we can change next Wednesday if we need to decision. And try to be as clear as I can on, which kind I'm making and invest appropriately, because I have to make those decisions every day. And then in terms of moments along the way, that have that, oh crap moment. Yeah. I'm incredibly fortunate to say, I feel like I'm like tempting the fates that we haven't had that many of those. We've had a couple of moments where we've had people who are important to us decide to go and do something else. And every time that happens, that's like, it's really depending on that person. How do I, move to the next thing? And there's partnerships that are really important to us that, it's been a huge win to get those, or disappointing when it takes longer than expected. But there haven't been any moments yet where I've been like, we're in real trouble here. It's been, there's no straight lines, but there haven't been any of those existential threat moments yet.
Yeah.
We haven't heard of Digible Dudes jinx or anything, so hopefully you don't have anything.
I feel very like I'm really tempting the fates saying that, so perhaps I should just make something up, but I don't know. The fates would know if I was making something up,
happens,
I suppose.
It's just coincidental, Jonas.
It's not your fault.
David, that question. It made me think Shoe Dog, though, because David turned me on to that. I don't know if you heard of the book, Phil Knight's memoir.
I have heard of it. I haven't read it, but I've heard of it. Yeah.
Well, his low moment, from what I know so far, is the FBI, investigation. So as long as that hasn't happened yet,
no, we've stayed clean. Nothing like that.
It would be kind of fun to be so culturally impacted that we have like in Sandlot, the movie, your movie referencing for this, but isn't it like the Great Bambino Curse or something that they talk about?
Yeah,
we need one of those.
That Billy Goat Curse for the Cubs. Yeah. Although I guess they did win a World Series in the last 10 years, so it's over. But
well, that's that is fortunate. I think it's different because, or at least fortunate, even though what you're doing is so hard, the two-sided marketplace. It's although it's free, but it's still a two-sided marketplace to me. You're not over relying on something. So like when Abodo first launched, one of their big, killer features was the first integration with Facebook Marketplace. Mm-hmm. If Facebook Marketplace had turned them off, all of a sudden that would have been death for them at that time. Right. Yep. And then you have Apartment List that was more on like, they needed the matchback reporting so they could even charge to their clients. So if they got shut off from the systems and then they had to say, hey client, could you please send us your list for the week, for the month? That would have been kind of kill them too, because who's going to trust the client to send over the entire list, or like Timely or whatever. So with you guys trying to stay self-contained, it's a harder road, but you don't have this over reliance on one particular channel or system or whatever other platform that you're building off of. So harder, but safer.
Yeah. We had AWS take us down for 6 hours one day. That was bad. But other than them, they're the only kind of single source. We've been incredibly lucky to have great partnerships, and have, lots of folks who've made commitments to us and have listed with us. So we're really grateful for the support of the industry, but it is a broad collective of folks who have listed on it. So you're right. And, one of the things about having, a fragmented marketplace with lots of folks on either side is that diversification. comes with it.
Yeah. Well, I guess the joke I'll throw in there is if you guys decided to launch one of these products that's like a competitor to Parler, then you might want like an AWS like backup, so you don't get shut down like they did.
Yeah,
Um,
true.
yeah.
I'm gonna try to stay out of politics a little more than that.
Yeah, that's probably a really great idea.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I know we're close on time here. Do you have a couple extra minutes for Reed to get in? He said he had some questions. So,
Yeah, for sure.
all right.
Well, whatever my questions were.
Oh, they have come and gone. The great Bambino curse has struck again.
That's right. I got derailed. No, but I will bring up one related to content and ILSs. So Dave and I have had this discussion, as he mentioned. There's somewhere in our archives is our what we do if we had an ILS. And one of the things, other than mimicking the Google auction based model, from an advertising standpoint, for me was content. That it still seems like it's greatly underserved or nobody's figured that out. In particular, I'll say the ILS species or genre. And David said, yeah, if they would just kind of mimic what Airbnb has done, that could be a really interesting play. So I'm curious, and it doesn't mean it has to directly, I guess, involve or connect with you at Dwellsy, but if you have any opinions there, and I'll add a little bit more to this, but we've been at a few conferences ourselves, but also come to the same realization that as you talk about that experience, so often it doesn't begin directly with with a unit, with a home, with a building. It's more about what's happening in that neighborhood. So there's like this big piece of the pie or equation that happens in advance. Then they start trying to find where they could potentially live that would work with all that. So any opinions, hot takes as it relates to content as you think about that kind of broader, I guess, renter experience?
Yeah, I think content exists on a couple of different levels. I think there's a huge opportunity to marry up rentals with other content that helps people make choices about where to live. Whether it's understanding the local restaurant scene or understanding, the local parks or, whatever you happen to be interested in, right? And being able to source all that information. But, it gets to a really interesting dichotomy because for the landlord who's listing, for the property manager who's listing, they've got this really negative feedback cycle because the more and the better information quality you present in the listing, the fewer leads you get. And the really sharp, smart landlords know that that's because poor quality leads are winnowing themselves out. But your average landlord doesn't necessarily come to that conclusion, nor would any rational person who hasn't spent as much time thinking about this as I have. You just think like, wow, okay, I put in a bunch more information and my lead volume dropped in half. Well, that's not great. That's a negative feedback loop. It feels like I did the wrong thing there. Now, if you observe that for a while, you realize like, wow, I'm still closing the same number of leases and I'm working a lot less hard for it. But that feedback loop is a real problem for our industry and the type of business we offer. We want renters to have fabulous information about properties so that they can make really good decisions before they use any of the leasing team's time. But that often doesn't flow well. Leasing teams want to know that they've got a fair number of leads that they can work. And if they don't have that, they get really worried, which I understand. They have traditional close ratios and they're used to those. And if they change that because the marketing team's doing a better job of describing their properties, that's it's a big change for people to get used to. So that's another layer of information friction in the space that we'll have to deal with in time.
Well, we're definitely kindred spirits here, Jonas, because I couldn't have said it maybe as eloquently as you, but I could not agree more. And there was a point earlier in the podcast here that I was going to challenge you when you were mentioning at Essex, the pay to play, and that there's not a lot of value in these ILSs unless you're, in that first page. What's the value of page 17? I've said quite a few times that I see value in page 17, but just be prepared for 10% of the leads. But those leads are probably going to be high quality. I've gone as far as saying make it yourself harder to find on the internet. That's actually a good thing. So somewhat connecting here to what you were saying as far as the descriptions, because the more that you do tell, and the less easy that it is to find you, the higher quality that lead's going to be. And I was glad to hear actually a friend of ours at Graystar, Melissa Robbins. She's been great, kind of advisor almost to us. But she did a presentation here in Colorado at the Apartment Marketing Association, and was asked to look into the future, 20 years or something. And she was like, one of the things that stood out, and maybe it's just because it's validation, but she said, I imagine a time where, our properties are celebrating and just fine with 15 leads a month rather than 250. And the reason is that 12 out of those 15 are going to close. So, just totally on the same page there.
Yeah. No, it's, the folks love the leads, and it feels good to have a lot of opportunities to make a sale. I 100% get that. I made a change at one point when I was at Essex, and I reduced our lead volume by 20%. And the leasing teams about lost their minds. And shame on me for not doing enough communications and not really messaging the heck out of that before it happened. I definitely could have done a better job of that. But it was bad for a month or two before they finally realized, hey, we're still getting our leasing done, and we all have a little bit more time now. But it took them a little while to get there, and I think Melissa's right on. I think that's exactly the way it should be, because you should be able to, have a high quality lead, and you should be able to close. If you get 3 tours, you should be able to close one of those. That's the way the world should work. It's not going to be for everybody, but it should be for most of the people who show up and make that effort. It's a lot of effort to go and tour a property.
Yeah. Well, Jonas, you've been incredibly generous with your time. We've gone way over, and we even started you late because Reed and I were having to reset things up and stuff. So, anyways, before we get out of here, though, is there anything that you want to talk about that we didn't touch on, or anything you want to close out with?
No, I'm, just excited to be here, excited to chat with you all, excited to welcome the industry to Dwellsy, and, ask everybody out there, if you want free high quality leads, you know where to go.
Yeah. Well, they can obviously reach out to you, Jonas, and get in touch, or on the website, is there a way for them to submit? And then,
100%. You can go to the website and there's contact info there. You can just submit a quick form, or you can just email me, jonas@dwellsy.com.
Great.